Hello, Vincent Myers. I'm really happy we're doing this interview. And I've watched a few of your interviews online. I saw a few of your podcasts, and I'm very excited from what I could see of you and hear of you. So let's dive right in. So my first question is related to your father, who was, from what I've read, the first African American architect in New Jersey. So I wanted to ask you, growing up around that legacy, how did that shape the way you see architecture, not just as a profession, but also as a tool of representation and also community building?
So, from the standpoint of, when I was growing up and um, around my father, it was really, I really saw him as a unicorn. And it took me a really long time to understand and appreciate exactly what was going on because it was really very dynamic. Probably the biggest thing has to do with exposure. And what I mean by that is so much of a young person's life is centered on how much they're exposed to different things, right? And so, in this particular instance, the exposure to a wide variety of things, the fact that he was one of the first Black architects in the state of New Jersey, but at a young age, I didn't really even understand that. So when I think back in terms of the uniqueness of that experience, I tell people that probably I share with them a picture of him, working on a drafting board, and, with, a round light, kind of shining on him. And I was only like 4 or 5 years old. And, it's those kinds of things where I was like playing on the floor and he was doing his work and he's always working, and always working extremely hard. And so that, to me, just that exposure, I didn't know really anything else. I didn't know what it meant. I mean, uh, I grew up, I was born in Newark, New Jersey. And, I remember my parents bringing us back, myself and my brother at the time, to Newark, New Jersey after the race riots. So that was 1968. And Newark had been completely decimated. And so when I reflect back on that, not only was it, exposure from the standpoint of just a very solid father, I didn't know anything else. Also, exposure to the profession. It was exposure to art, um, exposure to ultimately running a business. He owned his own business in Princeton, New Jersey. It was all those things. And so when that's around you, for a very long time, you kind of take it for granted. You don't really understand exactly what's going on. But certainly as an African American man, um, you know, I appreciate that more so than, when I was living through it. And I always tell people that it's that exposure, it's that confidence building, it's that uniqueness, it's all those things kind of wrapped up in one. And it's just so powerful. And when I see younger people in the profession and, trying to get involved in architecture and everything like that, I'm probably one of the luckiest people in the world, because I had that exposure. I saw it all in front of me, from very early age. And then it wasn't until after I got out of school, meaning out of college, and really started to work in the profession, then everything started to make total sense to me at that point. And just in terms of how lucky I was.
And when you think about that legacy today, what does it mean to you in terms of creating pathways for the new generation of Black architects and Black-owned architecture firms?
I'll go back to my father, and he's a Boy Scout troop leader. He was constantly involved in supporting nonprofit organizations. And again, it's one of those things I didn't really understand what was going on in my mind, but I sort of mirrored that when I got out and got very involved and still am very involved in nonprofit organizations, trying to help people. One of my favorite organizations that we're involved in firm-wide, but we were certainly, when my father was alive, there's the Architecture, Construction, and Engineering, aka ACE. It's a national program, but it has a New Jersey chapter. And that particular program helps disadvantaged youth in high school gain pathways to architecture, construction, engineering. And through that program, you basically, when we first started getting involved in it back in the early 2000s, we had work in East Orange, New Jersey, and so we were involved in ACE, and my father and I would go to the East Orange schools, to a high school, and we would teach them about architecture. And so there were several different high schools that were in New Jersey that were part of the ACE program, but we adopted, we sort of sponsored a school. And so the two of us would go there and we would talk to young people that were interested, largely African American students, but not always, but certainly disadvantaged, and just trying to get involved and understand what architecture is. And you work with the students, you have them build a project or design a project, and then there's like a competition of sorts, at the end of the year, and scholarships are given out. And that kind of hands-on experience, was fantastic because we really, everything kind of came full circle. I was there with my father. We were teaching young students, high school students. We were trying to understand some of the challenges they had. Many of them were coming from a very disadvantaged background with not a lot of, again, exposure to people of color that were in the profession. And so it was really fantastic to get involved and to just try to help them. And so then, I became a board member and with the ACE program here in New Jersey. With the help of the ACE program, we also provide scholarships. My father died 4 years ago, but there is a scholarship that we endorse in his name. And that's really fantastic because every year I participate in the selection of the individual that will get the scholarship, and it's nice. It's a $5,000 scholarship. And we've done it every year for the last 4 years, and it's really exciting. And that gives me an opportunity at the end of the year to talk to the New Jersey ACE students and get them excited about architecture, talk to the person that won the award, and just encourage them to keep moving. And the beauty of an organization like that is that it gives them the pathway. They are here working as, usually in their senior year, before they go to college, they get exposure working in a firm. And to me, that's so important. I mean, as an adult, I don't wish for anything, but I do know that there are things that I never did, even through my life, that if you just like, I've never owned a boat, right? And so I'd
Right.
love to know how to sail. I would love, but it
Yeah.
wasn't part of my life. And so you recognize early on, you really have to fight when you want to really do something. And it's always really helpful to have that kind of start.
Right. Um, let's move on then to DIG Group,
Hmm.
um, or DI Group.
You can
Um,
just use dig.
Dig, perfect.
Hmm. Yep.
And I understand that Dig was a merger of four different entities. And I can imagine that mergers can often, I don't know, dilute culture or vision. And yet, Dig has maintained a clear identity. And I wanted to ask you, how exactly have you protected shared values and long-term goals through that evolution?
Well, that's a great question. The state of New Jersey was sued by a legal entity because they weren't allowing fair and access um, to schools that were on par with. I'll use the term. I'll just sort of say suburban districts, right?
Right.
Because level of educational facilities wasn't the same. If you went into Newark or you went into East Orange or you went into Jersey City, Camden, Trenton, these are all the poorer cities in the state of New Jersey, even though in Trenton, that's the state capital. And if you looked at the schools, they hadn't really been touched pretty much um, for a very long time, and they were in a state of disrepair. So the state of New Jersey was sued over this because those school districts in those poor cities didn't have access to funding. They couldn't raise taxes to get schools done. And so, rightly so, the state of New Jersey ultimately was sued. And because of that, they had to ante up and dump money, into those school systems. And so, right around that time, New Jersey, the architectural community is relatively small, meaning we all know each other by and large. And there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of history, where there were a couple of firms that started talking about the challenges of getting any of the work in the areas where we were had already established contacts and had proven ourselves to be interested in doing that kind of work in the poorer communities for those school districts. They just didn't have any money, but we knew them all, right? And so that collective of those firms had a lot at stake because we were all small sized firms for the most part. So anyway, the state of New Jersey comes out and they say we're going to have this program, and we're essentially, the way that they had it set up was that, and we knew this, that only the largest firms in the state of New Jersey would get the largest school projects, and the smaller firms wouldn't get anything. And so we met, we came together and formed a group called NJK 12 Architects. And the reason we did that, we kept our individual firms and we set up another firm to exclusively pursue that work. It turns out that we wound up being the second largest recipient of contracts in the state of New Jersey. And the reason was individuals who were within those districts that we knew, they had a vote at that time in terms of who they wanted to work with. So once we got the sort of unlimited pre-qualification rating through the state of New Jersey, and then we were pursuing that work, we could get the biggest projects, and because the people in the districts knew who we were. And so, but I recall the conversation I had with my father because we had an office in Princeton, and he had gotten contacted by his friend who he had worked with years ago, who was one of and said, "Would you be interested in talking to us and joining joining the collective, this sort of collaboration?" And my father said, "Hey, this is really interesting." And he was always very forward thinking. And he said, "Is this something you'd be interested in doing?" I was like, "Yeah, why not? I mean, it sounds like a great opportunity." And through that, we were able to be very successful. My father wound up keeping his office in Princeton, and then I joined the collaborative when we became Design Ideas Group, the precursor to DIG, right?
Right.
So that was in 2006. But it's really a tremendous story because in 2022, we were AIA Firm of the Year in New Jersey, and in part, um, in part, our story was really about collaboration, um, about the type of work that we were interested in doing, um, our history in the state of New Jersey, the relationships that we had built and still built to this day. And so it's a really fascinating story. And the state of New Jersey is still one of our biggest clients to this day, and that started in 2000. And so, and to your point about how do you maintain culture? So imagine, four different firms with different cultures, with different people, and so we're I would say the not the high note, but certainly the recognition of having achieved a very strong culture, a firm that is on the rise, that was doing the right thing, was best represented, at least outwardly, when we got the 2022 Firm of the Year award, because it really recognized, in our minds anyway, that we had out of four firms, we became one, and it
Great.
takes time. It does take time, and we from that point, when we look back on 2022 to now, the incredible trajectory that we are on now is really fascinating because the people in the firm now, there was always, over time, you have different cultures, you have different people, um, you have in some early on competing interests in terms of what you're trying to achieve and the kind of culture you wanted to build, to make it work. And we went from nine owners, nine to three, where we stand
Great.
today. And my partners are friends. They are people who, through all of that work and all that effort, and that original idea of coming together and creating work in the poor school districts, and working together and creating that culture has never been stronger now. It is so amazing, to see where we are now. We're about 60 people. And when you peel it all back, our most rewarding work has always been, those projects, those civic based projects, those kinds of projects that help motivate people to different things. So it's really a tremendous story.
Yeah. Um, and I noticed that Dig is really active, and I found this really interesting. Just for my own curiosity, also, I found it really interesting that Dig is very active in senior living at a time, right, when populations are aging. So life expectancy is much higher than it was before, and also natality is decreasing. And to that, I want to ask you, what design elements do you prioritize to promote independence and joy, rather than institutionalization in these environments?
Yeah, sure. So take it from somebody who, I love talking about this because,
Good.
when we were, well, it's really interesting. I'll tie my father back into the story, right? Because when I was, at this point, probably in maybe in middle school, and there was an organization called Presbyterian Homes and Services. And Presbyterian Homes and Services at the time, they provided senior care, right?
Right.
Independent living, housing for seniors, et cetera, in the state of New Jersey. And they became, to this day, one of the top providers of senior care nationally. Their name is now SpringPoint, but they're still fundamentally, from the standpoint of just um, trying to be more inclusive from the standpoint of their clientele, but they were around for a very long time. And now they're SpringPoint Senior Living. But back then, having that was one of my father's clients, Presbyterian Homes and Services. And I remember him taking me. I was just a kid, and he took me over to the CEO, at the time, and his name was Paul Cheeseborough. I still remember his name to this day, and I was just amazed because I didn't, that was, my father, would meet these people, and then I would be in conversations with them, and I just thought that was just really fascinating um, how as a black person he was able to communicate with white people and talk to them and get work. I mean, it was really
Right.
fantastic. And so here I was sitting there, being exposed to all that. And so the interesting thing about all that is, I ultimately became a board member, at Spring Point Senior Living.
Mm.
and developed a relationship with that organization that had grown tremendously over the years. And up until recently, probably 3 years ago, I resigned as president of the board. Um, and and so, but that relationship and that connectivity to that organization became when we merged as a firm, right? It became Design Ideas Group, aka DIG. One of the things that I said was like, well, I have a reasonable amount of history you know, um, with senior living design. I worked on projects in during college that my father was involved in with Presbyterian Homes and Services. One of them, as a matter of fact, I was delivering plans to a 12-story high rise for them for affordable housing in Plainfield, New Jersey, when I was in college. And so go fast forward from there, own part owner in a new firm, and Presbyterian Homes is a client. And I did the renovations to that tower that I was delivering plans for when I was in high school. And it all went full circle, right? And so I needed to interject that because, again, it shows the relationship and the history of time spent being exposed to different things and how those things can help you grow. Um, I'd also say that I'm 65 years old. And when you think about that organization and others, are on the one hand, it's a really amazing time right now. If you happen to be growing old in this society right now, meaning that um, you can still be viable and still working at 65.
Right.
When we back in the day, and that's not that long ago, um, you know, ba- people retired at 55, 60. They would
Yep.
go to a continuing care retirement community as it was formerly known. Now it's known as a life plan community. But the
Yep.
idea is that, you would go there when you retired very young, which is amazing. At 65, I still come to work every day, get up early. I still have that work ethic, like ingrained in me, as do my other partners. And it's really amazing to think that, I would not be doing what I'm doing, and I would be retired, and living either independently or through assisted living or worse, right? At a very young age. And so, what's interesting about that particular market sector that we're involved in is that um, we grew that business into, a multi-state endeavor, meaning we did and are doing work in um, Mississippi, Arizona, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, you name it. We really were hard at it. But anyway, it's really amazing that you know when you think about senior living, I tend to think that our best work is creating environments that are, cater to people that might decide to live in them for the most part. And what I mean by that is on the independent living side, on the assisted living side, we have done just about every spectrum because it's needed as people age. But we found that the kinds of facilities that get designed now, um, you sort of either have really high end places or other places that are skilled nursing, right? Because people typically try to stay home as long as they can.
Right.
All right. That's true for me. That's true for my partners. That's true for everybody I know that's my age. They really are reluctant to want to leave their environments to go live in you know, someplace other than what they historically have referred to as their home. And so we've worked with organizations to help them imagine different way to go about doing it. In the case of life plan communities, they invite people to from the community to kind of come in and get connected to other people within the organization, so they're not lonely. Many of the organizations now are not expanding a lot for those reasons because the population is choosing while the amount of people that are aging is incredible. Again, there's that sort of like, okay, only when I have to go, only when I really want
Right.
to go. So the kinds of places that are emerging right now are really exciting because they cater to that, to individuals who, um, yes, maybe they don't want to have, a big house anymore, and but still want to be wherever they go, they still want to be seen as being very vibrant. And so what that means is that one building type that had emerged and still is emerging is connecting them back into university communities, right? That makes a lot of sense. That's their alma mater. These places spring up. They can participate in various programs. They're connected to people that they knew, environments that they knew when they were in college. The arts, the athletics, the different kind of program. We're very interested in that particular market within senior living because we think that it kind of connects with, I think, what people want to do. They want to remain vibrant. They want to remain strong. They want to remain connected. And when they need services, they want them close by.
Right. Right. And you mentioned your time in college and also university, the university community model. And I noticed that DIG's projects sit kind of at the intersection of education and health and community life. And my question is, how have your personal values and life experiences influenced the kind of projects that you choose to pursue?
Mm-hmm. Um, it's I it again. I think it has so much to do with me individually, my partners collectively, the kinds of work that we find really rewarding, the kind of work we do real well, the kind of work where we feel as though, to some degree, um, there's a real appreciation. We part of our mantra and part of our commitment is to support the communities where we work, right? And so when we are able to go into communities and do work, we explore ways that we can add value to those areas and to those communities and to those people. And it takes different forms. Sometimes it's just exposure, what you and I have talked about today a little bit, meaning having people connect with what we do. Because for many people, it sounds strange. It's a little mysterious. There's a little bit sometimes a little bit of confusion in terms of what we do versus what a contractor does,
Right.
what we do versus what an engineer does, um, you know how it all works. And so it's really, I think, for many people that aren't absolutely aware of what our role is. It's a real eye opener. I can't tell you how many people we run into that say that's what I always wanted to draw, or I wanted to be an architect, or I wanted to do that. I always encourage them, hey, you can, you have a bedroom if you're still growing up, and there's so many different things that you can do to influence your environment. And so when we're out there and we're thinking about the kinds of people that we are, there's a real genuine connection for those reasons that get made between who we are, what we do, and who they are and what they do. And so it's really fascinating to just have those kinds of connections with people.
Thank you. Tell us more about the belief that a business should reflect the community it represents, is translated into practice in your past projects.
Um, that's a really great question. And it kind of speaks to a couple of things. One, we when we became DIG or Design Ideas Group in 2006, it was a merger of several companies, and we one of the things, one of the stories that we like to talk about, because we weren't an MBE firm at the very beginning, right? And so that was a conscious decision on our part, and it was really an evolution of why it was important for that distinction. And not only did it signal an important evolution within the firm, but it also it paved the way not just for minorities, but women within the firm. So much so that women right now within the firm are really represent the core of the leadership going forward. And so it really it was an outward expression of this is who we are, to kind of let people know who we are, and more formally what we stood for, so that other people would be able to see that, and then also outwardly, in terms of the community, separate and apart from what we would say is, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and those things. There's just the fact of the matter is that there is just a diversity of people that are merging in communities and workplaces, and um, we're very proud. I'm very proud of the fact that whether we're going into a community or we're going into a boardroom, uh, it's really powerful and rewarding that our firm is represented by that diversity. And I believe very strongly that it's appreciated on the other side. And why wouldn't it be? You know, when as a firm you reflect other people, and there are women at the table, there are minorities at the table, there are smart people doing the right things for the community, that it's really amazing. And so that's a great benefit, and I think it's added value. And I know that when we are, as the architect of record, or as the architect assigned to a library, or a project like that, you go out into the community and you have just see it on people's faces, like, wow, that's amazing. That's really kind of like, I didn't know, like, who is this? Who is this firm? This is really, really cool. And I think decision makers, I think it helps them because they, whether they're elected officials, or they're community leaders, or they work for the civic organizations. Um, you know, it it certainly helps them, and it helps their constituency when they have people working on projects that will be within their community for a very long time. Um, it's a very strong signal. It's an added value to the equation for sure.
And speaking to that, speaking about representation and inclusion, as a Black-owned minority business enterprise working in a civic and institutional projects, how do you see representation influencing how these spaces that you you do ultimately serve their communities? How does representation influence that?
Well, another great question. Every project for us is unique unto its own. Every project that we work on is an opportunity for expression, to create, first and foremost, spaces that energize people, spaces that unite people. And, there are very subtle ways, through an abundance of light, and the colors and materials that we choose, are all important factors to making those spaces, a celebration of life, really, quite frankly. And um,
Well put.
yes, and in some instances, there is there's sort of like a local particularized, need or something special about, a community or a building that we're designing. Um, and, so our goal is to find out what that is and what that means. Um, in the case of the Unity Center at Stony Brook University, as an example, which is a sort of example of, that sort of, cultural center that they wanted and how the space had to really embody that and represent that. And, I can't describe it, but if you look at the Unity Cultural Center, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about because it'll blow your mind just in terms of every piece of
I'm sure.
furniture, every the lighting, how the lighting was designed, the furniture, the bookcases, the reception area, all the pieces of furniture within the space. It really is. It's magical. It really is. And so our job is to kind of find out what is that need, what is that specialized kind of space or spaces that kind of make that strong connection. That's true of the libraries that, most recently we did in Philadelphia. We did two of them. And so much of it, they were, one had its own sort of unique story behind it. And so that's our goal is to kind of find that story and see how we can represent it. We, we have, as part of the services that we provide, we do a lot of environmental graphics. And layered in conjunction with our interiors, those environmental graphics are just spectacular. And we did, we've been hired independently just to do graphics in some of the buildings just because of how powerful they can be. So, sort of think mural in a way, right? Um, and but all inside the building. And so our staff, they're so talented at talking to people and finding out what is it that is special about what you do, and what's the story behind this community, and how can we help you represent that in within the space. And it's really, it's so powerful. I mean, I can tell you that whether we were doing a library in Long Branch and it's really connected to the heart and soul of community is connected there and how that community thrives on that and how it's represented within the building, architecturally and through those graphics, or in the case of Ewing Cultural, Ewing Senior and Community Center in yeah, it's actually right near my home, and that's another fantastic story about the amount of graphics and the amount of storytelling within the building. It'll just blow your mind. And in that particular building was modeled after Louis Kahn, who designed for that community a bathhouse, and it's right next door to it. It's historic, and people come from all over the world to see this bathhouse. So think, like a park, and you would go into a typical kind of like, bathroom facility at a park, and Louis Kahn revolutionized what that meant. And so imagine people coming from all over the world to see a bathhouse, and it's really kind of cool. And so that's all interwoven into the graphics and the story within the building, as well as and equally as important as the history of the community and who are the people that shape the community. And there's probably that building is about 80,000 square feet, and there are two-story sections of that building that have storytelling in it that tie back to the community. And it's we all can't wait until it's done.
Last couple questions.
Sure.
looking ahead, both for DIG and also your profession, what changes would you most like to see in how communities are designed, and how does that vision connect with the legacy of Black architects who came before you?
Sure. I think there's probably there there needs to just be a little bit more focus from the standpoint of and this is true. We talked about this early on, just in terms of the resources that um, that help connect, that help generate the kinds of funding that's necessary to make sure that within the communities that we're talking about, that there are things that are maintained, and that there are places, that there are these sort of beacons, if you will, where people sense of security, um, a sense of pride, um, and sense of belonging, right? And so, if um, I think the wish of most people that care about such things, and I think that many people do. I think the desire to want to do that is certainly there. And then, there are a lot of people, and it's very, very encouraging. I'm blown away by how much, how much people are able to do with practically nothing. And I'm not suggesting that they should. I'm just painting the reality of people. And
Right.
so I sit on a foundation board. It's called the Borden Foundation, and we provide money, obviously, to well, nonprofits, probably about 27 to 30 in the Mercer and Monmouth County here in New Jersey. And when you go into those communities and you really see what fantastic stories, what people are doing, how they're doing it, how they're helping people. I mean, it really just, it's very humbling. It really is. I mean, that's to me, that's like, it's just incredible. And I'm always so proud of what they do. And just glad that I'm part of an organization that can help provide that money. And I think, for professionally, it's very rewarding. I think um, Black architects and other minority architects that I'm hoping that there are more of us that decide to pursue the profession, because I think, there's a real opportunity for, those individuals to emerge and to participate and to engage in a wonderful profession that's extremely rewarding and on multiple levels, where there's plenty of opportunities to do different things within architecture, and enjoy it. I think it's a fantastic way to have a different profession that is about building and growing and spaces that last for a very long time. You know.
And last thing, I think congratulations are in order, since DIG is celebrating 20 years since its inception.
Yeah.
And as DIG enters this next chapter, what are you most excited about? And where do you hope to see the firm in the next 5 years, let's say?
Wow. Um, as I said before, we're in a very exciting time. So much of it, if you look back at our what we conceived to be our plan, regardless of what our plan was, we just found ourselves, benefiting, in a much more profound way from the great foundation that we had set our minds on, right? And so that foundation was never really about money. It was just about doing the right thing for people, doing the right thing for our people. Through thick and thin, we made that we made our place of business a place that people would be respected, a place where, more or less they could call home, and and pursue great work and do and be mindful of and careful with, our craft, or the craft of architecture, right? The mother of all arts, and so we didn't have a whole lot more than that. Um, we used to just sort of say, "Hey, look, as long as we stay in business, year after year, kind of we're happy, right?" And people stick it out with us, and people want to stay here. We're happy, and as long as we're doing good work and we like the work that we're doing, it's check, 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 check. And so,
Right.
we didn't really, if we look back years ago and sort of said, well, we are where we are now with an office in New Brunswick and an office in Philly and an office now in Queens, which is all very exciting. I don't know that we kind of pinch ourselves and go, how did we get here? and
Right.
but but it certainly takes a lot of effort, and I'm not sure, where we're going to go next, but I can tell you one thing. If I felt more invigorated by the potential that the firm has, to connect with other people, to do fantastic work, and the sky's the limit, and wherever it takes us, it takes us, and um, just really excited. You know, we have that the firm. We just opened up that um, the Queens location, and so now we're just really connecting with more exciting people. And one door opens in one place, and then you just meet a whole series of other opportunities, and the world just opens up. And so we're very fortunate, we're very humble, we're very thankful. We're enjoying it. It's hard work, for sure, but we come in and just do the right thing, and just enjoy it ourselves.
Of course. Thank you again for taking the time to speak with me. I think this turned out really great. And you were obviously a wonderful speaker.
Oh, thank
Um,
you. It's a pleasure
I
meeting you, for sure. Thank you so much.
thank you so much. Thank you. I look forward to more discussions in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely.